This is actually the worst thing ever. It's been months since my last actual full essay. I decided to ditch my podcast series because I was just like, hey, so it turns out you need visual aids when you're doing this shit. And also, the day I decide to record, everyone in the country decides to do gardening outside, so I hope you guys like the audio quality of today's episode. Strap yourselves in, boys, things are about to get a little bit weeby. Vocaloid culture is my everything. Most of you know that by now because cringe culture is dead, and now that we've been asked to stay inside for most of the year, we as a society have now learned how to enjoy ourselves in our company. But because I really like being the center of attention and padding my videos to excess, I will now give the stragglers in the audience an extremely quick crash course on Vocaloid before we get started. Part 1. The hecky is a Vocaloid. Also, yes, my long-length videos will now have little subheadings like these with timestamps in the description so you can remember where you left off if you need multiple sessions to watch the whole thing. Sorry if it ends up feeling really scattered and segmented, I'm a bad writer. Vocaloid by Yamaha Corporation is a voice synthesizer where music producers and hobbyists alike use databases containing pre-recorded samples from voice actors and singers, otherwise known as voice banks, and can create digital vocals for their music by writing a melody line and typing in the lyrics. Pretty neat, ain't it? Except not really, Vocaloid 5 is kinda shit. As a means to detach the voice provider from the virtual singer they provided their voice for, the distributors of these voice banks will often create fictional characters to represent the voice rather than using the provider themselves, as well as being a means to make the database more marketable and allow artists the creative freedom to have that singing voice represent any character in their work that they want without having a defamation lawsuit on their hands. The most popular of these voice banks being one voiced by Japanese actress Saki Fujita, which was given the fictional identity Hatsune Miku. Even if you don't know anything about Vocaloid, you definitely know about Miku, be it from the odd live performance you found on YouTube, being one of the unfortunate souls that decided to be friends with me, or from the latest unfunny gimmick account that won't stop showing up on your Twitter feed. Nevertheless, it was through this umbrella of sorts Vocaloid had cultivated that the software, as well as other vocal synth programs people don't care about because they're cowards, gained immense followings for essentially being an environment where anyone could create whatever they wanted with any artistic medium for the purpose of sharing and self-expression. But if we went through all the details, justifications, and nuances, we would be here all day, especially considering Miku's not really a Vocaloid anymore, and she's re-released on a new engine by a parent company, and her samples kinda sound worse on this new engine, and I'm a little bit scared. So, if you're more interested in the specifics of getting into Vocaloid culture, or the software itself, I made an actual 50-minute video about a year ago going over all that, which I will link in the description. Thank you very much. So, where did this lead us? Ultimately, being the face of Vocaloid, Hatsune Miku is the biggest corporate shill on the planet, and has a face plastered on everything for the purpose of selling to otakus whose brain cell count matches the amount of hiragana characters they know. I know 20! Toyota, Family Mart, Lux, Pocky, 7-Eleven, Xperia, Coco, they really like pretending Vocaloid fans even have driver's licenses, don't they? And, no, we pretend you don't exist anymore. Basically, it was inevitable that Miku would find a way to video games, which happened when Sega were just like, hey, why don't we just make one of the best rhythm game franchises ever for a laugh? And they delivered on that with Hatsune Miku Project Diva and its millions upon millions of sequels. You thought we were finally free from the sequels, weren't you? Then the Switch game got announced. And when the Switch game got announced, we all collectively said, oh, it's gonna be rubbish, isn't it? And then it was, and we stopped asking for things ever again. At this point, my relationship with every rhythm game series I love is just not recommended 617.7 hours on record. This is one of my favorite games. Project Diva isn't just amazing Vocaloid fan service, considering I started the series before even listening to Vocaloid music. It has a superb mechanical core in how it weaves with its overall design that on this indulgent channel where I gush about the things I like, it only makes sense that I make an extended essay on how Project Diva is, say it with me now, the standard in how to make a good rhythm game. Joe, you say that all the fucking time when you like a game. So let's say hypothetically, you walked up to me and you were like, Joseph, you like Vocaloid, and because you're very good at stringing enormous, gigantic, ginormous words together with a shit accent, I'm assuming you're also alright at critiquing rhythm games, or at least good at fooling people into thinking you are. Then, after calling me handsome a couple of times, you ask me one of two questions. What should my first Project Diva game be? Or, if you're particularly green, what should my first rhythm game be? Well, that's easy, mother. I'd probably respond with Demo for the second question, but for the sake of dramatic effect and drawing it back to this essay, let's say I'd respond to either question with one universally agreed upon answer. The finest entry to grace this complete dumpster fire of a series, in which I love with all of my heart for giving me a reason to continue living in life, because it's just so spectacular, without flaws, and encapsulates everything I love about Vocaloid and rhythm games. Yes, you know the one, guys! PDX. which did absolutely nothing wrong. Part 2. Yes, this is a Project Diva X essay. Alright, I promised myself I'd make my work more accessible, so for those who didn't get that joke, let's go to crash course number 2. Project Diva has a lot of games on a lot of different platforms, but for the sake of this essay, we're just gonna list through the localized ones that actually made it to the West. There's dozens of Japan-exclusive ones, but the problem is, I never played them that extensively, the good parts of the series didn't happen until the localized games happened anyway, and I don't really care. The localized game started with Project Diva F on the PS3 and PS Vita. This was kind of a soft reboot that revamped the series into 7th gen, and is basically a 40+ song count rhythm game that also includes a mode called the Diva Room, which is like a mix between virtual pet and dating sim, and Baby's First Source Filmmaker edit mode, where players can make their own music videos and charts to post online. This was then followed by Project Diva F Second, a direct sequel also on the PS3 and Vita, with a new setlist, new game mechanics, and new refinements. Project Mirai, a 3DS spin-off for casual audiences with an Nendoroid-like art style, a stronger focus on the virtual pet elements, and more simplified gameplay. Project Diva Future Tone, a PS4 port of the Japan-exclusive arcade machine, which comes with 200+ songs and its own exclusive gameplay mechanics, but contains no bells or whistles like the Diva Room or edit mode. Project Diva Megamix, a diet version of Future Tone for the Nintendo Switch with a smaller song count, an exclusive game mode, and a new visual shader. There was that PSVR one that happened one time, but I don't really count it. And the most controversial entry in the series, Hatsune Miku Project Diva X for PS Vita and PS4. Project Diva X was a game that had a lot to live up to, releasing close to Hatsune Miku's 9th anniversary, the Diva series' 7th anniversary, and technically being the 10th mainline entry, and so the team decided to spin the game into uncharted territory until it got hit by an oncoming train. Obviously I'm being hyperbolic, hyperbole is kind of my brand, and a brand is a replacement for a personality, but Project Diva X is commonly referred to as the most disappointing game in the series, for a myriad of changes and oh god why moments that all pile up to make a very polarizing experience, at least if you're an existing fan of the previous games. I wouldn't necessarily want to say a lot of people hate this game, as there's a lot in it that's genuinely good, but the faults were just too much at times, so the fans don't look back on it too fondly. Hell, there's a little bit in it where even I think, how did you even think that was a good idea to begin with? And despite being the one I'm recommending, it's not my immediate favourite. It's more second place in the series for me, with first place going to F Second, because, well, F Second is just one of the greatest video games ever made, guys, there's no debate here. I just think X is the best first Diva newcomers should definitely play, and I firmly believe that its high points, combined with its structure, provide the most faithful summary of what it means to be a Project Diva fan. Being the rhythm game community's star contrarian, I'm giving this talk about how if you say one more bad thing about PDX, I will probably swat your house, because I really do think it provides the greatest welcoming experience to Vocaloid culture, the Diva series, and hell, maybe even the rhythm game genre at large. So, let's get to some discourse. I need to slow down. Part 3. Shin Mikumi Tensei. Now that you know about the absolute basics of Project Diva, what is it that you do in X in particular? You know, other than listen to a teenager's informed takes about contraception. Like I said, the previous entries were just traditional arcadey rhythm games. Go to the song list, play the songs to unlock new ones, then just play the ones you like while probably using your collected Diva points to get bonus costumes and furniture items if you want. PDX, however, takes that concept, beats it up, and steals its lunch money, because this time around, it's an RPG with a plot. Yeah, you heard me right. The characters that were purposely designed to be blank slates with no established personalities or relationships with each other so the artist could portray them however they like, are now in an RPG storyline where they actually have to talk to each other and feel their fish eyes piercing into their non-existent souls. This is a special occasion, in fact, because unlike most YouTube critics who reviewed this game, I can describe the summary because I actually bothered to wait for, buy, and review a version of the game that is in a language I can actually read. You know on the back of boxes when it says basic reading ability needed to fully enjoy this game? I feel like they should change it to basic reading ability needed to have an informed opinion on this game that isn't just a bunch of bad faith criticism from unrealistic expectations. Okay, I'll try to stop with the sass. I will try. The premise in X is Hatsune Miku and her 5 friends, Kagamine, Rin and Len, Megurine, Luca, and these guys who get to hang around so long as they pay the rent on time, are virtual singers who reside in a virtual world where they're only able to sing provided there is a user who is helping them. Essentially an allegory for playing a Project Diva game or using the Vocaloid software software itself. Miku informs you, the player, that there hasn't been a user in the virtual world for a while, and as such she's been unable to sing, leading to other parts of the world going dark. And so you team up to generate an energy called voltage and bring power back to the 5 elemental clouds that make music in the virtual world. The clouds of classic, cute, cool, elegant, and quirky. This is where the game's RPG elements come into play once you pick the songs and difficulty modes available to you through a questline menu as opposed to a traditional rhythm game song list. The first subversion of PDX is its main mode, live requests, don't rank you on grade points, the traditional rhythm game scoring system based on your accuracy in the chart, coupled with a health bar that drops as you make mistakes. You know in other rhythm games where you have that accuracy percentage out of 100 depending on how well you're doing? Yeah, that's grade points. Instead, you don't have a health bar and your success is determined by how much voltage you generate, which can be boosted by other facets outside the rhythm game, such as dressing up your singer in modules, the in-game terminology for costumes, matching accessories, or building up your relationship with that singer by giving them gifts, and the modules will even contain perks that affect how much voltage you earn, what kind of items you get, or how the rhythm game itself plays. The objective, depending on the request difficulty, being to accumulate enough of a voltage threshold and then getting bonus unlocks from any excess that you generate. On top of that, charts you play during live requests have a period called chance time, usually right before the grand finale of a song, where you fill this little star meter and have to land this huge star note at the end of the phase by flicking a thumbstick. In previous Diva games, hitting the chance time star activated an additional vignette to the music video, like a visual effect or alternate ending, but in X, hitting the star kicks off a transformation sequence where you unlock a new random module, thus replacing the Diva Point shop in the original games. And that's X down to its bare basics, and you repeat this process journeying through each of the clouds with their own groups of songs to restore light to the virtual world while collecting modules and accessories along the way to generate more voltage. And you can tell very quickly how these design changes would ruffle some feathers in the fandom, because they were not what I would call clumsy, but a lot to take in at once. X was a game that threw out, or at least sidelined, and hid away a lot of structural rhythm game conventions in the name of this new RPG facet, so there are a few problems that rose from the execution along with its small amount of content, only having 24 songs, 6 medleys, performances which are 4 to 5 other Vocaloid songs mashed together, which is way more Kino than it sounds, and 2 DLC tracks. Let me tell you, 2 DLC songs to me doesn't sound like a lack, it sounds like restraint. The most notable issue is the voltage system is a one-to-one substitute for grade points rather than a system that organically merges together. Your performance when doing live requests is only tracked by how much voltage you earned through your score chasing, and the multipliers added by your singer's module, accessory, and relationship setup. What this means is while your performance is important during live requests and you get better unlocks for clearing higher difficulties, your mechanical accuracy in the actual chart itself, without taking the modifiers into account, is not saved or kept as an individual coexisting statistic, save for an optional stat menu on the results screen that will eventually be wiped when you finish the song anyway. By extension, this then means not only can you do perfectly in a chart but fail a request anyway if your voltage setup isn't powerful enough, but if you get a perfect, a full combo with no mistakes while playing a request, that will not be saved to your records and the game will only keep a note of how much voltage you earned. Playing X with the traditional accuracy-based scoring of the previous games is instead relegated to the free play mode in the sub-menu. Pick a song, play through it with no voltage tracking, and you then get points based strictly on your mechanical performance and nothing else. But free play is treated only as an extra mode separate from the rest of the game, meaning it keeps your high scores, but it can't contribute to story progression or unlocking new modules and accessories. The method of unlocking modules and accessories was also a point of contention, replacing the store where you buy the costumes you want with essentially a random draw of whatever after every song, which means that X is considered to be a little on the grindy side, especially when you can only unlock a module for whichever character you've picked to be the lead singer, and you at times can transform into a duplicate module you already own. Adding on to this, the story progression throws out a last minute fuck you after you beat all the songs, where it has you grind an excessive amount of voltage across all the clouds to unlock the last medley in the game, and once that's done you need to continue the voltage grind if you plan on unlocking the post-game request to get every last available module. And on top of all that, the blistering chucklefucks over at Sega found out how to make profit from the grind, because the PlayStation Store actually sells a £5.35 key that unlocks all the accessories and a £7.99 key that unlocks all the modules. But I promised myself I'd do an essay without frothing in the mouth about capitalism, so let's just quietly move on from that. At least it's not gambling or carving up the game's content. The point is, Project Diva X has flaws. it's heavily flawed, and is far from being the perfect or best Project Diva game. I am more than happy to tear X a new one, considering so many of these issues had easy fixes, like not having dupe modules, and having your free play scores be tracked and saved even when you're playing live requests so purists can still feel accommodated. Along with a few stripbacks like the mechanical streamlining of the social elements, boiling down the customization and interactivity elements of the Diva Room to just gift giving, the especially controversial removal of edit mode, and the biggest downside of all, the lack of Diva F Seconds Patacake minigame. What do you expect me to play now, Sega? But even so, what X provides to me is so refreshing and significant that I still can't help but recommend it as the first entry you play, at least when you go in knowing that its odd faults here and there aren't really consistent elements that can be found in the other games. This isn't a video to say PDX is exempt from criticism, because as many of you know, I'm always down to bully Project Diva when it does something I don't like. But it's more giving credit where it's due, making the best of a bad situation, and listing what I want the next game to preserve, or saying that the game is still at the very least better than Future Tone. Don't at me. So let's turn the contrarian up to 11 and get to some analysis. Part 4. Your first sound. Like, literally ever. One piece of context that's very obvious going in with PDX that I'm honestly shocked nobody thought to apply to their review process is the fact that the game has very obviously been designed to entice new players who otherwise aren't into core rhythm games. And not the cop-out excuse sense people like to do with Mirai of, oh, it's horrifically dull and underutilizes its mechanics because the casuals, but in the sense that it has actual mechanical and structural changes in design elements to make the broader genre appear more accommodating and make use of play conditioning to train the player into the rhythm game mindset in a fun manner. Little history lesson, I guess, but PDX and the PS4 port of Future Tone came out within months of each other, and everyone for some reason thought this was a bad move as it would mean the two games would supposedly cannibalize each other and not give X enough of a chance in the limelight. But that implies two things. That one, if in an alternate reality X released on its own, Project Diva fans being the emotionally stable grown adults that they are would totally not start shrieking about how they want new content, and two, that the new games were even created for the same audience. Project Diva X was a game for the newbies that otherwise wouldn't give two shits about F Second, or Future Tone because they're arcade-like games that just have you spam through songs and nothing else. And Sega knew this and knew the RPG would be a direction veterans wouldn't like, so released Future Tone as a tide over to keep them quiet for 5 minutes. It's literally that easy to tell, and this audience divide is the very reason Future Tone and by extension Megamix are not games I can recommend in confidence to non-veterans. I'm gonna develop on that point much later, but due to its more stagnant and sterile design philosophy, while it may be appealing to veterans and have a better value for money, Future Tone and Megamix are games that, if evaluated on their own, confirm to people who don't like rhythm games why they don't like rhythm games, because they're such caricatures of the genre that don't try in any way to be alluring. The PS3 and PS Vita are 2-generation-old obsolete consoles barely anyone owns anymore, meaning F and F Second, as much as I love them, are now off the table too, and Project Mirai is so basic it doesn't really draw you in the engaging way that X does. So in the reality where we have genre newcomers who only own PS4s and have to choose between two games, Future Tone and X is the only one I would recommend. So what is it that X does so well? Because as a Vocaloid fan who watches Extreme Perfect videos on YouTube, I thought X was poo-poo pee-pee because someone said something about grinding and the game being too easy, which are obviously the only two elements that make a good game. Well, think back to your early days of when you just started playing Project Diva, and I'm certain that for a ton of you, it's the customization that pulled you into the series. I mean, the customization is what pulled me into the series. I didn't play rhythm games that much before playing Project Diva. Hell, it wouldn't surprise me if highly skilled Project Diva player and king of weird YouTube production values Hisoki got into the series for the customization, and now the man's power level is complete insanity. The only thing stopping him now is access to an editor. Like, you mean to tell me that in this game I could not only change the outfits of the characters on screen and make them look like they just ran headfirst through a cosplayer's studio apartment, but I can even swap out the characters in the music video entirely while still preserving the rigging and facial animations? That's not something that should be allowed. That's not something we as a species deserved. Persona Dancing didn't have that, and that's why it turned out not being that great. Yet Sega would just here like, fuck it, gamers like it when they're given choices. If someone wants to swap out all the choreos with the ladies so it just looks like multiple clones of Kaito being fabulous, then so be it. With the power of Project Diva, all your ships are possible. But this is an appeal that's present in all of the games, and it's not exclusive to X, otherwise it wouldn't be so central. So of course, to really hit home how much everyone loves the customization, it only makes sense that we make it part of the play conditioning. We make it a central game mechanic that not only incentivizes variety and experimentation, but actively adjusts adjust the rhythm game to suit the inexperienced. And with that, welcome to another official JOEZCafe brand immensely lukewarm take. Health bars in rhythm games are bad and pointless, and I don't like them. Nobody likes them. They make sense in an arcade machine so that people aren't hoarding the cabinet, but other than that, no. Health bars have been a pointlessly annoying element tacked onto rhythm games for eons because people don't know how video games work and think that everything needs an immediate failure state because otherwise it's not a video game. Excluding the fact that not being able to reach a grade boundary has for an equal amount of eons been the established failure state of a rhythm game anyway that communicates to the player what their mindset going in should be other than just don't die. Health bars are an archaic mechanic that serves no one because all they do is make the game just barely playable for newcomers by not letting them experience and practice the mechanics, and once you have said mechanics down, it becomes unintrusive to the point of uselessness. Playing mainline Project Diva is already a rather intimidating prospect at first glance on account of its sheet music-esque charting system, and it especially has a barrier to entry if you're not that familiar with PlayStation controllers. So surprisingly enough, leaving the player baffled for the less than 5 seconds they had to try the mechanics is a horrendous teaching tool. But Joe, Project Diva games have no fail options. Yeah, the cost of either penalizing you or just not counting your score entirely, future tone. That doesn't solve the learning issues or aid the player in getting into the right mindset of play whatsoever. It's just being a petty asshole because they think they're not playing the game properly. Seriously, have you guys seen the health bar in Osu? That is an asshole health bar that shouldn't be in rhythm games. Despite not tracking grade points, live requests in X are a significantly better teaching tool that tells the player, well, to go have fun and do the best they can through voltage modifiers and the removal of the health bar. And while one can argue voltage modifiers can be seen as a handicap that eases off the tension, the fact of the matter is not only is the idea of attaching elements from other genres a really endearing and motivating design element that makes the player feel like they can use their creativity and knowledge from other games to control the intensity of their experience and as such not feel like a fish out of water, but the score chasing nature of voltage, the module perks and how earning more gets you more unlocks sits the player into the score chasing mindset of core rhythm games, that there are so many more exciting opportunities lying in the game and its skill ceiling than just reaching the bare minimum to survive. That by comparison, slaving away to appease a health bar means nothing but bitterness and taking what you can get, especially when health bars don't even guarantee success because it's possible to get to the end of a chart with health left over but still not clear the grade boundary. So how do they inform or motivate the player and how they're supposed to play in any way?
You're fucking lousy again! Fucking lousy again! It's just my life, it's lousy. This game brings out what I really am. Lousy. 66.3! I did better before! Okay, I'm done.
This design philosophy of establishing a welcoming gameplay loop is also something I feel was incorporated in the module drops. Yes, module drops mean you have to earn modules at random, and sometimes you can get duplicates. For some weird-ass fucking reason that shouldn't exist, you can get duplicates. But firstly, there's the elephant in the room. That being, getting Diva points to buy modules in the previous games was just as grindy if you didn't spam extreme charts on Perfectionist, don't lie to yourself. But leaving the availability of modules up to the game in this particular instance isn't really what I would call a bad thing. It's bad in games where there's a clear in-your-face business model your patience is being tested for, which is why the unlock keys are kind of easy to disregard because you need to at least actively look for them on the PlayStation Store and the game doesn't mention them in any way. But as it grew on me, I became much more fond of module dropping over the point store explicitly as a game mechanic. That doesn't mean I'm okay with the duplicates or the removal of the additional chance time vignettes from the F series, as those in of themselves were ingenious ways of giving the player more interactivity with the game world, and I really wish they stuck around in X. But with module dropping, not only does it mean you're substantially rewarded way more frequently and with way more satisfying fanfare compared to the F games, but having my modules being chosen for me combined with the module perks was a way bigger incentive to try out more diverse outfits and see firsthand which music videos they worked best with. In the F games, I kinda just unlocked the modules that went with the songs and didn't really try on the side ones like Gothic, White Dress, Noble, etc. I'm just one of those kinds of players where I won't bother with something in a game if it doesn't have a mechanical purpose that contributes to the core loop, and as humans, we naturally react to the concept of overchoice by just falling back to familiar or default options like the recommended modules. But in X, they had perks like raising technical zone voltage, point bonuses for 50-note combos, and lowering the chances of getting a duplicate, along with every module having its own elemental aura that earns more voltage if you use it in a song of the same aura, thus recommending even more variety than just using the same grind out outfits over and over, and you end up making all sorts of presets that satisfy different functions and auras. That's insanely cool. Even modules like Mako V3 have effects that increase the voltage rate every time you make a bad or wrong button press if you want to take advantage of how bad you are at rhythm games to get some more unlocks or pass a nasty side quest. And there's even the funniest implementation on the planet, which is regulating all the best perks in the game to the really skimpy swimsuits. Like, what's that? You want the voltage rate to increase automatically every couple of seconds regardless of your performance? Well, you gotta use Miku in a bikini and Kaito swimwear V. Unlocking a random costume and seeing it play out for the remainder of the PV fills you with the refreshing sensation of, oh hey, this is actually kinda cute in motion, and you end up using them way more often. Again, what X primarily excels at is giving a mechanical purpose to more of the side functions in the series, and thus conditioning the player to understand and explore more of what makes the series enjoyable. Project Diva X is basically the rhythm game version of World of Light in Smash Ultimate, where it's actually kinda decent, and anyone who says it's bad just didn't fucking bother to learn the mechanics and play it properly. What makes you think you can unlock Pauline when your spirits are underleveled, you fucking idiot? Project Diva X is grindy if you wanna 100% the game, which can be said for basically any video game, and last I checked, the ease of 100% completion shouldn't be the determining factor on whether or not a game is good. Hell, getting the first set of crystals to unlock the ending medley is actually a really fast process if you know what you're doing and you're not just spamming charts with your brain off. I need to get 900,000 voltage in the quirky cloud for a crystal? Easy. Streaming Heart on Extreme with a level 2 character, a quirky module that gets me 1400 for every 50 note combo, a quirky mecha-made accessory setup that boosts my voltage rate by 50%, full combo the chart, and boom, 278% gain rate, 220,000 voltage in the bag, and I got a really cute outfit out of it. How is that not the most satisfying thing ever? It's no wonder that my first playthrough of this game all those years ago was so boring and frustrating, because I wasn't using the mechanics to their fullest and was actively trying to rush through the game to unlock all the recommended modules and free play charts. And of course, a game isn't going to be fun if you're actively going out of your way to not learn how to have fun with it. X might be the most annoying Project Diva game to 100%, but it's one of the most enjoyable to actually play and unlock items in if you take the game slow and appreciate the individual bits and pieces. And putting the new module mechanics at the center stage to get players to come out of their shell and more naturally and organically find their true appeal is so much more of a superior reward loop, because being trickled with costumes after every song or so is so much better than blitzing through songs without a care in the world and then dumping your earnings on 50 plus outfits in one go, only 2 of which you're ever gonna wear. And it's because of this much more exciting way of showing off Diva's core gameplay that now I've finished the main story twice and maxed out all the prisms and crystals, I don't touch free play all that much anymore unless I'm aiming for a perfect, and instead still play live requests because it gives me so much more of an involving and thrilling way of playing the game. Especially considering the most important part of live requests, that if you exclude the lack of grade points tracking, it's still the same rhythm game at its core. Think back to the grind to get the ending medley. That's when you unlock the hard and extreme difficulty modes, and surely you were going to replay those songs anyway to play them on hard and extreme, so what is it about this system that's grindy? The voltage system is this shaky and occasionally frustrating but fascinating way of making Diva more engaging without feeling like a complete unfocused rework that throws things off kilter, and that's the design philosophy of rhythm games that I love. Still being a raw, skill-based, accuracy-rewarding rhythm game that's faithful to the genre at its core, with the odd external narrative or mechanical system that makes things more varied and interesting, like the voltage system in X, the tree in Demo, or the nightclub in DCVR. Literally the only major thing I would change about the story progression is being able to access all of the difficulties. Starting a new save file means you only get live requests for easy and normal, but to be fair, this has been a problem that's been present in all the Project Diva games, having to finish a song on normal to unlock hard, and then finishing all the songs on hard to unlock extreme, to which you're way too burned out to play the game on extreme anyway, or as I like to call it, the Megamix experience and why I only have 20 to 30 extreme charts. That falls under the definition of grinding, and it's actually less tedious in X because you unlock extreme for all songs as soon as you finish all the clouds on either easy or normal. You can unlock the whole of extreme mode in X in less than 4 hours, and it takes double that in F and F second. So yeah, I'm even being nice to that. I can be nice sometimes. If you told me Project Diva X's gameplay was unimpressive because it was a little underdeveloped and continued the annoying Project Diva trend of having to unlock the harder difficulties, I would agree with you. But despite that, I still think it's a fun system that adds a lot of spice to the series, especially for newcomers, that I would love to see it further developed upon in a newer entry rather than just immediately scrapping it. And keep that in mind, that's going to be a persistent theme in this video. While it did have a few bumps in the road, Project Diva X still preserved the core rhythm gameplay no problem at all, with some fun additions that I genuinely don't think anyone is excluded. But even if the systems are all well and good, we still have a story we need to get through, and don't worry, I got a whole load of spirited weak defenses in the name of artistic value for that too. Part 5. Crypton's Abridged Fanfiction. Is Project Diva X's plot good? Not really. Well, it depends. If you're here for Final Fantasy or Persona, you are in the wrong place. Save for the occasional funny or cute gag, the dialogue isn't exactly what I'd call engaging, and due to the circumstances of their existence, the Crypton gang aren't exactly charismatic and feel immensely sterilized, like an online influencer that's one mental breakdown away from saying something racist.
What a fucking
like, you'd think as the characters were purposely created as blank slates, that would give the writers all of the creative freedom in the world to make the most batshit story you've ever seen, but that's something we'll instead have to pray for in a sequel. I feel like Nihongo Gamer put it best in his PDX review, where the visual novel sections are kinda like watching an interview for your favorite celebrity and then finding out they're not as cool in real life as you thought, like my Twitch chat when they found out about my fanfiction. Dojin time, y'all! But even so, while if I were to change the story, I would do small things like spruce up the dialogue, maybe add a bit more slice of life sections, and add in some more dynamic story events and set pieces that aren't just, come on guys, we gotta practice for this performance, there's not really much I would change about the story structure itself. And by that I mean the clouds and how X's narrative is written around them. Project Diva X, frustratingly, has a good and bad story mode, in that you're not there for engaging moment-to-moment storytelling or character development, but the way it thematically informs the gameplay makes things more personal and immersive. Okay, so in this section, we're having a quick aside to brief on the later areas, but it's partially because I spent all my time cooped up inside, and it means I've been watching a ton of video essays and I want to flex what I've learned. Cards on the table, I don't like musicals. I love music and rhythm games, and I can commend musicals for their extra and shameless nature, but personal preferences dictate they're not really my thing. They're a little too out there and cheesy for my liking, and in terms of music taste, I'm not really one for conventional show tunes unless your name is Oliver because you actually had some bangers. Now, if someone made a musical about two gay lovers who focus on their self-improvement and opening up to understand their love for each other through dance with a techno and house soundtrack, I'd be all over that shit if every theatre in town hadn't stopped reading my letters. But going back on topic, despite my ambivalence towards musicals, I have an immense interest in the mechanics and language of writing musicals, as they possess a lot of the same mechanics and language that I feel goes into making a good rhythm game and what you might want to convey to your audience. With a stage or film musical, you want to keep some synergy going between the storytelling and the musical numbers, so watching it doesn't feel like a glorified concert or music video that starts and stops at every song. This is why in so many musicals you have a more layered order between the dialogue and the music, like the instrumental chiming in while the characters are still talking, or tying the lyrics with the previous line of dialogue so they can follow that up with the actual performance in a smoother fashion. Much like how in a rhythm game, you want to unify the soundtrack, mechanics, and the world the game is set in so the gameplay loop is interesting, is some degree of thought-provoking and emotionally resonating, and the gameplay isn't just some isolated, overly complicated way of listening to music. We went over this in my demo video because I like repeating myself. Playing a song in demo to grow the tree bears a lot of similarities to Nancy singing Papa as a distraction to lead away Oliver from Bill Sykes. In both rhythm games and musicals, a song is not just a catchy interlude you consume and then move on. It's a flowing event in the work that makes the audience feel part of the situation. She is no longer the same blushing rose! Because spoilers, she dies at the end. So let's have a little history lesson that I more or less just lifted from Sideways' videos on Disney music. Oh, don't worry, I'm going somewhere with this. Or at least I think I'm going somewhere with this. I'm still figuring all this out as I go along because I'm desperately trying not to look like one of those armchair developer essayists who think they know everything. So let's just call this a hypothesis for now because that gives me free deniability. So as many of you know, if you've ever watched a YouTube video about animation, just in general, at least once, because like gaming channels, they're literally all the fucking same, The Little Mermaid was the film that started the Disney Renaissance in 1990, and success can be traced in some degree to Howard Ashman, who had an understanding of this Broadway-style musical language and how to portray it in the medium of animation. The way he structured the soundtracks he worked on blended with the narrative using the methods I mentioned earlier, and was based on this philosophy of musical numbers being a ramping up of emotion that breaks free of the narrative once the emotions are too much to bear. Too much emotion to speak, you sing. Too much emotion to sing, you dance. It's like a proverb in theatre or something. Key distinction to note though is I can't think of or pinpoint a rhythm game that follows this exact principle in a seamless manner. After all, we still shuffle through menus and loading screens before the song starts because charts are their own separate mechanical instance that's judged individually, and the mechanical nature of video games means we can't have an exact one-to-one adaptation without immensely deviating from the genre's arcade-like core. Ashman is obviously not a game designer, and deviation does need to be made to fit a medium's own needs. This isn't me condescendingly saying video games are bad because they're not like films, but the point is that music is significantly more memorable and serves a work more, provided you can make some form of emotional association to the viewer and other mediums in the work. After all, feedback that makes games fun and satisfying to play stems not just from the mechanical design, but from the emotional response a game gives you, right? The epiphany of solving a puzzle, the calmness of planting flowers, or the bloodthirsty joy of beating the shit out of a foe who is presented in the narrative as ruthless. So, I really do believe that putting emotion and feedback at the forefront of rhythm game design is what's needed to make even the most cut-and-dry rhythm games fun to play. The musical is more than a music video or concert where the songs chime in to interrupt the plot, and I feel like to the same end, rhythm games are not just glorified competitive jukeboxes where you play a chart for the explicit purpose of getting a full combo, with everything else in the visuals and design just being inconsequential window dressing. It's how we have moments like in Demo where we play Fluquoir as we hit the top of the tower, DCVR where we violently dance with our friends to bond with them. And yes, even the emotional response people had to the songs nearing the end of Vanessa's chapter in Citus 2 is an example of this synergy and effect, and it just makes rhythm games better. I mentioned Citus 2 in yet another fucking video, and it's to say something nice. What is going on here? And it can even show in the smallest of implementations to give some degree of charm and personality. Musyncs and Voice, for example, are very basic, generic vertical scrollers that I just don't play as much anymore, but their varying visual backgrounds that thematically correlate with each song and change depending on the song's intensity hit home those emotional sensations that they still stick in my mind compared to the likes of Stepmania and Archaea. And back to Project Diva, this is something Future Tone failed miserably, which again we'll go over later, but I believe F2 and X in particular did in spades throughout their structure and mechanics, and that's a consistent theme that I want to keep in your mind as we move on in this coverage. Part 6. Vocaloid Subversion. The clouds are the best addition to the Project Diva series that should keep being used till the end of time. The RPG mechanics? It'd be nice if they stayed, but the clouds and auras should forever be a part of the series, even if we go back to the traditional arcade roots. As mentioned before, the songs and modules in Project Diva X are split into multiple clouds, or worlds, that each contain their own aura. Classic, cute, cool, elegant, and quirky. The clouds ended up being rather mixed response-wise, mostly because of their ties to the RPG mechanics, and people being extremely pedantic about what aura a module should have, because here at the Project Diva fandom, we reserve our criticisms for only the most important facets of games. But thematically, I find the clouds to be the perfect encapsulation of how much more there is to Vocaloid culture, and I think that is X's biggest strength. I distinctly remember this one Project Diva X review that said X's soundtrack is the most similar sounding. And while music taste is certainly a subjective element to take into account, and we could spend all day having a nice discussion about that, they're wrong. X is the most subversive Project Diva game outside of the new mechanics that shows so many more areas of the vocal synth community in a much more clear-cut and defined way to subliminally explain the diversity of what it means to be a vocal synth producer despite having the smaller set list. Vocaloids, and particularly Miku herself, are commonly perceived as vocals for cutesy J-pop songs that I can't count on both hands how many newcomers I've sent songs to which they reply with, "I didn't know Vocaloid songs sounded like this." The most common misconception about Vocaloid is that Miku is a singer owned by one singular band rather than a purchasable instrument any composer can use and attach their own artistic identity to. So a lot of the genre and composition diversity flies over a lot of people's heads, especially when previous Project Diva games either had a very small pool of artists to take songs from, or mostly just reused the same few flagship tracks fans are overly familiar with, and the entire VSynth scene ends up being broken down into one repetitive box that that X tries to break out of. X is a notable entry to me because it pushes forward in the vocal synth scene, rather than jogging in place to gloat about its legacy. We have the classic, or neutral cloud, which has a lot of songs that sound like they fall under Miku's typical public brand, techno tracks like Satisfaction, cute fantasy like Name of the Sin, along with the First Sound and Love Song, two songs that are very minimal with regards to overall production complexity. That classic encapsulates a lot of how the public see Miku as a singer, and it rolls with that assumption by making it the first playable cloud in a playthrough. The classic cloud is one big bait and switch, because the player is tasked to explore the other clouds afterwards, and so many more possibilities open up. Idol pop, rock ballads, sultry jazz, oriental, along with the most distinct and refreshing producing styles we've seen in years. There is no bigger blindside to a newcomer than hearing Rin's voice and thinking, oh, so her voice is for like cutesy idol tracks because she's this twee sounding teenager, and then playing all the punk rock tracks in Diva like Lost Ones Weeping and Tengaku, and realizing, oh, artists like using her voice because her voice and range is actually really fucking powerful compared to the rest of the Crypton 6. And X emphasizes that further by giving Lost Ones Weeping its cool aura that lines up with other similar songs, so it doesn't feel like a weird outlier or a part of the J-pop box. But here's another fun history lesson in my flaccid attempt to defend the game. The Project Diva series has always been infamous for the quote-unquote over-representation of Miku. Crypton Future Media have 6 vocalists, but the other 5 often get overshadowed by the dump truck of songs in every game where Miku is the lead. As we said before, you can change the module so any character you want is dancing in the PV, but the songs still only have vocal tracks for whoever originally sang it, which in most cases would be Miku, and actually, hang on a sec, let me go on a tangent with this. Okay, so you'd think with a critique such as that, you'd be able to open up into maybe a broader constructive discussion outside the Project Diva series about how maybe overly extortionate it is to buy more than one Vocaloid voice bank due to the monopoly Yamaha and other voice bank manufacturers have had in the industry for years, leading to a lack of production standards and affordable pricing. The overrepresentation of Miku as a broader critique of Vocaloid culture could in theory be spun into a discussion about how purchasing a variety of Vocaloid voice banks is too much of a financial risk for producers due to their overpriced fees, tight grips when it comes to bullshit licensing deals that disallows the production of commercial works with some vocalists, or how it just makes way more marketing sense for a small producer to create their music with a singer who has the biggest, most marketed presence in the community, even if it doesn't fit their work. Vocal synths, as a business, creatively and financially strong-arm music producers into using Hatsune Miku, but no, supposedly this is the work of lazy developers who have some weird, unexplainable vendetta of Kaito because everything that happens in a game functions in a bubble. Apparently the hot new thing when critiquing art is not wanting to lead said critique into any form of intent or outcome, so sorry, Project Diva fans, you've only made step 1 of gaming discourse, C-, see me after class. So I couldn't agree more with the fact that voice bank diversity is still an issue in the Project Diva series, shown at its most severe in X, but even so, the heavy representation of one vocalist in this entry in particular was another nice touch to show the production diversity. Yes, I'm even defending the lack of VB diversity, just end me now. See, the Vocaloid engine has gone through many iterations and is immensely flexible. It's all well and good to draw some notes and attach lyrics, and when described that way, Vocaloid sounds piss easy to use as if it's making the vocals for you, but that can't be any further from the truth. The samples in the databases are very raw and very flat, like they're direct studio recordings, and the engine comes with a variety of tools like pitch bending, gender factor, cross-synthesis, and so on that making good quality vocals for your music is not only reliant on how you mix those vocals in your audio workstation, but the other core facet of vocal synths is using the engine's tools to apply your own vocal styles and vocal inflections, a process known as tuning through use of attack, vibrato, adjusting how the pitch rises and falls between notes, etc., as well as the general mastering process and how each producer handles vocals in their music, be they human or vocal synth. Seriously, it's just something I really wanted to emphasize. Mixing vocals in your music is already the most insufferable thing ever, and speaking from experience, trying to use vocal synths without making them sound like shit is pain. Vocaloid also has another element of its distribution called appends, sub-databases where they have the voice provider record samples in a different tone of voice to apply more tonal versatility to a singular character. For example, this is a raw untuned scale of Hatsune Miku V4X original. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do. And this is that same scale, but I swapped the original voice bank out with V4X Dark.
Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do.
And this is that same scale again, but with V4X Solid.
Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do.
When you hear most of the songs in Project Diva X have Miku in them, that sounds initially like the tracks will get repetitive or not sound like they're by separate producers, which I think is an immense disservice to the talents of the producers shown in this title. And tangent, this is also why I feel like screaming into my own asshole when someone says they don't like a Vocaloid song because, quote, it doesn't sound like Miku, because they're Philistines like that. Miku is a completely different singer when interpreted by different people that more effectively conveys the tone and genre they're going for, and X also having a shifted focus less on the famous songs from days of old with Vocaloid 2, and more on the songs that were made with Vocaloid 3 and 4 with updated features like appends and cross-synthesis, means this is hands down the most refreshing Project Diva setlist, and the most faithful and informing introductory setlist despite having so little. To throw some examples at you, this is the Hatsune Miku of Malo. This is the Hatsune Miku of Enbuna. This is the Hatsune Miku of Michi M. This is the Hatsune Miku of KZ. And this is the Hatsune Miku of Giga P. I could go on and on with more examples, but I think you get my point. This is what I mean when I say PDX is the best first entry, not only because of its more accessible nature in the gameplay department, but I feel that as a first experience to the vocal synth scene in general, it is the most faithful and much more willing to convey what it offers, rather than just pander to fans like the previous games do with an excess of songs we've heard a million times since 2007. And this game doesn't have any slow charts! But Joe, this is a video game. I'm not here to appreciate art, I'm just here to get high scores because my pee-pee's soft. Very true. And that means you're on my turf now, fuckers. Part 7. Rhythm game cold and hard. The mainline Project Diva games are some of the greatest rhythm games ever created and can be summarized as such with one word: texture. Well, I guess feedback is the word, but texture sounds more fitting for my argument. Anyway, texture. See, video games are great, and we love them very much, despite most of our Twitter timelines being about how most video games are actually a left-wing cabal set out to be secretly bad the whole time without your feeble gamer boy brain realizing. Don't you love how much of an intellectual I am when I say that Persona 5 is actually the worst one, or that Tetsuya Nomura is just trying to pass off his Disney fanfiction for a living? Aren't I so great with my basic reading comprehension? But so much of our love, I believe, is drawn from the thought-provoking escapism of feeling like we are part of the experience. I mean, it only makes sense, right? When we're taking part in a medium about interactivity, feeling like we're interacting is going to be the reason we come back to a game. And this is accomplished by attaching the interactivity closely to other facets of the medium to feel like we're actually doing something, other than pressing a single button and watching the pretty lights flash before our eyes like good little consumers. Rhythm games where you play an instrument like Guitar Hero, Taiko no Tatsujin, and Demo get a really good leg up on this front because you feel like you're making a direct contribution to the song thanks to the artistic context of playing an instrument for a performance. You just need half-decent sound design and you're pretty much ready to go, and as such the games feel fun, immersive, and satisfying to play, unless you're like me and can't use the guitar or drum controllers because you have the coordination of a spider in the clutches of a gross toddler. So more unconventional or contextless rhythm games need to go the extra mile a bit to justify how their mechanics are attached to the experience, because otherwise things will feel hollow, empty, and inconsequential. This is something that came to mind for me when I showed Citus Alpha to a friend and he read through all the story pages, saying that it did sound interesting, but he wouldn't stop asking the question of, so why is it a rhythm game then? Which really stood out to me, and in the case of Citus, I still can't figure out a clear-cut and compelling answer. The Citus in Citus 1's story is a database that stores memories as music. Okay, so what do these mechanics have to do with the act of accessing memories? And why did the story want to have memories stored as music specifically and not anything else like a TXT file? What stopped this game from being a shooter or a visual novel? In the case of Project Diva, its raw mechanical shell of tapping along to these flying symbols alone isn't enough, because as a standalone concept, it sounds really boring and has no musical ground to it. It's like saying, I have an idea for a shooter where bullets come out of the gun, or I have an idea for a platformer with a jump button, and not saying anything else. Video games need an artistic identity and background to justify their genre nowadays, otherwise they're just very, very boring. Quote that and put it on my tombstone. This is actually the reason why I prefer playing official charts in rhythm games way more than community-made charts in games like Osu, Beat Saber, and Project Diva with its edit mode. Not only because I feel like there's so much more to a rhythm game's appeal than just its mechanical shell or how hard the game is, and because rummaging through a pile of shit to find the odd gem isn't my idea of a good time, but also because when playing the official charts, I can tell they're made by an experienced designer who actually understands what makes the rhythm game they're charting for so immersive and enjoyable, and the do's and don'ts of the charting philosophy. It's some semblance of artistic and thematic cohesion custom-made charts fail to capture that makes the game more consistent and more enjoyable. And as soon as we attach a context, function, and artistic identity to the flying symbols, everything starts to fall into place to make the most engaging rhythm game system I've ever played. So let's first apply the context. These flying symbols are the vocals. Pressing the buttons is the function in the game that is allowing the vocalist to functionally sing to the point of where they will cut out if you miss, and you press a button to each syllable in the lyrics, along with the odd instrumental break to keep the song functioning and flowing throughout. Okay, nice. But we've hit a snag. That connection sounds immensely contrived. Tapping cymbals and singing are two very different physical functions, so how can the player make the connection in their head without being told directly to stay immersed and invested, to feel like their inputs are actually doing something and having weight and texture to them? Well, easy. We have varying note types. You can press different buttons, and there are other contextual inputs like holding a button for sustains and pressing two buttons at the same time for powerful booms in the vocals. Getting better, but still a bit contrived. How can we make the mechanics more dynamic and contextual so they can be universally applied to a multitude of songs and really hit home the mechanical connection to the context? Well, if you're following at home, you've got that down already. Not only do the varying note types have different contextual inputs like holding or pressing two buttons, but the inputs and even their varying hit sounds have varying levels of physical, visual, and auditory intensity to more closely match the physical and auditory intensity the singer is experiencing in their performance, so the player feels more connected to the singer's physical exertion. Keep the word intensity in mind, it is very important for the rest of this essay. Songs that are fast-paced or shift between varying pitches have a wide variety of symbols the player has to jump around their controller to simulate that precise pitch control. Double notes, which are used for the brief and powerful inflections, are not only bolder in their appearance, but are accompanied by the player slamming both their thumbs down on the same button and direction, and the hit sound has a much stronger, more climactic response. Claps and tambourine smacks to accompany shouts, staccatos, glottal stops, and so on. Hold notes require constant pressure on a button and have a long, flowing tail on screen as they approach the note slot, and a drum roll plays to convey the physical strain of sustaining a note smoothly, or even the building suspense of a crescendo. And it is this texture, this justification of why the mechanics exist and how they work with the music, putting the music and its strength at the forefront, that makes F2 and X the two best entries in the series. Part 8. Project Diva wasn't good until F2. Well, F was great, F2 was just too powerful. Listen, I love F, I really do, and it was the first one I played, but going back to it just doesn't feel as good as it used to after what they introduced in F2. And the PSP era Diva games are fine, they're acceptable, but they have even less mechanically that they just couldn't hold my attention for long. For being a rhythm game series I love, I don't love that many of the games. It's a weird relationship, I know. F2 not only added in a ton of what I love about Diva's design for X to refine, but complemented it with easily some of the best charts in the series that demonstrate Diva at its peak. The only thing I can criticize X's charts for is the occasional moment of feeling undercharted. Basically where a chart in the harder difficulties doesn't feel like it has the pace or input density that properly complements the song. Multiple difficulty modes exist in games to accommodate many different players, so even though X was made with newcomers in mind, an excuse people like to go for when defending Project Mirai's straight up lack of an extreme mode, it does lead to some odd moments of disappointment. And like I said, the whole point of making a game accessible to newcomers is to still provide optional challenge challenge, or raw, dense gameplay so that veterans still feel accommodated and so that newcomers can try the intended experience as their skill further develops. So there are some odd wet farts in the charting, like the breaks in Satisfaction for example, how they're charted as when the texture and intensity of those sections would be carried out so much better if they were charted more like But if anything, notice how that change would have benefited the general immersion and pacing of the song, rather than just being a buff in difficulty for the sake of buffing difficulty. That'll come in handy later. F2 was the one that introduced contextual hit sounds to hit home the functional purpose of each note type, as well as adding in its own note types that have undeservedly never seen the light of day because rhythm game stands are cowards that don't like change. So let's use Project Diva's contextual design to justify why star notes are actually kinda fucking neat. The first Project Diva F game introduced star or scratch notes, which are hit by flicking the analog sticks, swiping on the Vita's touchscreen, or swiping on the DualShock 4's touchpad, and in Diva charts are commonly used to visually differentiate and mechanically simplify instrumental breaks where there is no singing. They have uses beyond that, but for the most part they're a way to make the backing of a song feel more mechanically distinct. Star notes were initially poo-pooed because of their unconventional input, especially because in the Vita version of the first F game you couldn't use the sticks and had to use the touchscreen, and I won't act like stars were used perfectly out of the gate. They did start out very forced, but the notes still have their own enjoyable layer to them that was cracked as the series went on. Flicking the analog sticks on a controller is a very unique and dynamic form of input in a rhythm game that is far removed from the physical sensation of pressing the buttons. It's daintier, it has more momentum to it, and it involves moving a springy physical object rather than pressing it. It's a softer, more excitable input, which worked wonders for softer, more ambiguous instrumentation like strings and background synths. Using the touchscreen and sticks is imperative to what makes star notes stand out, and anyone who says that they should have been bound to something like the shoulder buttons is missing the point of their prime function. And just like the button inputs, scratches were given so much more depth in F2. Hell, X still used stars, but understanding their texture, the team reserved them for softer instrumentals and sounds, while more complex, harder sounding instrumental breaks that would be more fitting to play with the buttons were charted as such. Satisfaction's Extreme chart even did this thing in the instrumental breaks, where the first 4 measures are stars, followed by the following 4 measures being buttons to show that ramp in pitch and intensity, along with being a form of ergonomic preparation that allows the player to immediately jump back into the vocals when the break finishes. But going back to F2, this game introduced double stars, which involved flicking both sticks. These notes had a brighter, bolder appearance, and just like the double taps, were accompanied with a striking cymbal splash for intense spikes in the instrumentation. And the game also introduced link stars, which were star notes, but rather than following the traditional note spacing other types had to abide by, a link star speeds off to the next link wherever it is on the playing field, and you have to visually track it to land it at the right time. A controversial note type, as it meant blind reads were way more difficult than they should have been, and while I can agree some refinement would have been nice, link stars are perfect for that directional momentum the instrumentation can convey, and has the player's eyes join in on the dance. Like the disorienting guitar solo of 2D Dream Fever, where as Miku thrashes around a strobing stage, the link stars cut across the screen rapidly, only to slow down in an exhausted, dizzying spiral the moment she stands still. It's dynamic. It's connected, and it allows each song to feel like its own unique mechanical experience with its own physical and emotional sensations no other song can emulate. And while X unfortunately doesn't return with the link or double stars because again, rhythm game fans are cowards and don't think mechanical refinement is a thing, it has its own slam dunk of a mechanic, the rush notes. Rush notes are the shit, and if they don't come back for the next mainline game with double and link stars, we riot. Rush notes are a special note that has you tap the button as rapidly as you can before the note bursts in order to earn extra points. It sounds insignificant mechanically. Like I said, rhythm games are a bit bland if you're only looking at them mechanically because points don't mean anything in Diva unless you're playing the worst one. But what makes them tick is contextually, they are primarily reserved for the most powerful of sustains in the song. The immensely climactic belts that need all of the singer's energy to pull off, condensed into a note you have to give your all to physically, which just like the other notes, connects you more to the singer. The best use of rush notes would easily have to be in Raspberry Monster Extreme, where the sustains in the last chorus, unlike the previous verses, are all swapped with rushes instead of holds. As the stage and camera work gets more and more rapid and vibrant, Miku thrashes more and more, and once you land that last rush, Miku stops, turns to the camera, and sways to the last guitar riff, and you come back down from that high with basic taps to the riff. Do you see what I meant earlier about conveying a ramp of intensity through rhythm game mechanics in a similar vein to musical theatre? The way the notes fly into the slots, your rapid movement across different areas of the controller, the different movements you make in varying levels of strength for different inputs. All of this here is a dance, because speaking and singing just can't do the intensity justice, and this is what I like to call the dance of the rhythm game. God, I am getting way too excited about this. Okay, you need another example? I gotcha. Contrary to what I've implied over the course of this, you do not need a full narrative like Project Diva X to accomplish the best parts of the series. It's just what makes X in particular a strong standout entry, and F2 has been able to accomplish this ramping intensity through singular narratives contained within the charts. 2D Dream Fever's Extreme in F2 is still the best boss chart in the whole series, because even if it's become easier over time by comparison to the other offerings, it's a constant pressuring back and forth of speeds and time signatures, but despite the chaos, it also knows when to use the gentle stars at just the right times, to which its last chorus is a jumble of doubles to tire you out before the holds at the very end. It's a unique, disorienting, and physically taxing chart, which makes it so amazing. But it even gets better than that. One of the greatest charts I have ever played in a rhythm game, hands down, is Kagero-De's Extreme from F2, and when I first played this, it kickstarted my journey to find out what made me love this genre. Part 9. Love of the Heat Haze. Kagero Days by Jin is a song that only ever appeared in F2 and is about two children who get themselves stuck in a loop of the same 2 days as they try to cheat death. It is an absolutely perfect 10 out of 10 as a chart with a few gimmicky things that aren't my cup of tea, like only using X and circle because, oh, blue and red is the color scheme of the original PV. But what the Extreme chart accomplishes is patient zero for my love of good rhythm game charts. And you're free to write your extended paragraphs about how this PV isn't faithful to the original story of the song or whatever, but we're on a time crunch. We're talking about how its strengths favor rhythm game design, which is detached from how faithful it is to the source material, and I don't care, this is the Mona Lisa of rhythm game charts, alright? In F2, this is interpreted as two overlapping stories with the perspective you see being determined by your performance in the chart. As mentioned before in F and F2, passing chance time near the end of a song leads to a change of some kind in the PV, like a visual effect or alternate ending. Kagero Days cranks this to 11 by having the chance time at the very beginning, and its pass or failure determining the direction of the entire PV. Miku is on stage during a performance, and the chance time star appears just as a stage light falls on her. If chance time has failed, the PV glitches back to the performance, and you spend the entire song there just before the very end where the stage light falls again, and she awakes at home to realize she's stuck in a time loop. If you pass, however, the falling stage light kills her immediately and takes us to the alternate perspective in this bedroom, where she was walking down the street, a cat runs into the road, she chases after it, a truck narrowly crashes next to her, and she dies, kicking off the time loop once again. And most people would just end their thoughts on the song's inclusion at that. It had a pretty cool chance time effect, but it gets even deeper than that and has an even stronger bond with the game mechanics. In this alternate perspective, Miku has to, with each time loop, learn how to save the cat while making it out alive, dodging lampposts, not falling over fencing, and so on. But the actual chart itself is the star of the show here, not the alternate scene, and the PV is merely the vignette of the true attraction. What makes Kagero Days so great is not its narrative gimmick or the innate presence of a narrative, but how the gameplay mechanics engage with the rest of the work. In the PV, each main loop attempt is timed to the chorus where the song is at its most intense, and that intensity is matched with the chart. Notes are plentiful. They start to form a disorienting loop at every pitch change. There's this crisscross section in the part of the chorus where Miku belts notes to the beat, and you feel this left to right directional momentum, like the notes are bouncing around or stomping, and as the chorus trails off in a softer chain of notes, something happens killing Miku, starting this all over again, and the intensity intensity goes back down a peg with basic taps and star notes to signify an intermission from the action. But where things get the most interesting is that as the loops continue and Miku becomes more knowledgeable of the events around her, not only is the universe of the PV more challenging for Miku as more and more hazards and obstacles appear, but the chart starts to pick up in its mechanical strength. The first chorus where the truck dodges her before a lamppost kills her is just tap notes and the occasional double. The second chorus where she tries to rescue the cat after dodging so many other obstacles is similar, but introduces more frequent chains of double notes, especially during this moment where Miku is reaching for the cat in desperation, requiring some more physical exertion from the player. And after that second attempt results in a death, we reach this extended intermission of star notes. These act as a brief moment of downtime, but they're still able to maintain the intensity through the fast pace, the odd double star here and there, and Miku is expressing visible frustration as a montage of following loops show her dying again and again. It's a tougher point of rest by comparison to the link stars in the previous rest point, which builds the pressure while still providing a contrast, hyping up and preparing the player, instead of just tiring them out or mentally desensitizing them from a constant difficult intensity, because otherwise the grand finale would feel less impactful. And after this montage, the instrumentation becomes calmer, Miku's voice becomes softer, and the player is in this tranquil but focused portion of the chart, where there are only taps, but they're fast-paced and the cymbals alternate between each other in conjunction with alternating pitch changes. As Miku nods in determination, the percussion builds, and she reaches for the cat one last time. And after 3 dainty flicks of the analog stick, 3 star notes that accompany the muted instrumentation, and 3 beeps before the last chorus to emphasize that moment of calm, you are given one of the greatest payoffs in a rhythm game, period. The last chorus is a key higher than before. The camera work is chaotic. Miku clutches the cat as she dodges and weaves between every falling threat, and while this is happening, the entirety of the chart in this sequence is nothing but double notes that alternate in directions, meaning the player has to slam down their thumbs repeatedly, focus on when to change direction with minimal travel time between directions, and maintain their stamina lest they miss an input, as the heavy slamming of their hit sounds blare into their ear like thunderous footsteps. And after Miku successfully escapes, she runs back to the dark strobing stage from the beginning of the PV, grabs her guitar, and the player, just like Miku, has to rush down to the sticks on their controller and immediately compose themselves after their moment of excitement, so they can play along to the guitar riff with the stars, the calmer note type with stick flicking, as if nothing happened. Miku successfully dodges the stage light set up at the beginning, and after a flurry of stars when all seems calm, the cat knocks down the stage backdrop, falling onto Miku and killing her one last time. And the player exhales. The chart wasn't even that difficult, but in a moment of relief, they exhale. Kagero Days Extreme has some of the most comprehensive understanding of how to make an enjoyable rhythm game chart through mechanical intensity, emotional resonance, contrast, tonal shifts, overall immersion, and incorporates all of its elements, not just the PV or raw difficulty like one would initially assume, to make something that stands out that no other chart can match. It's one of the easier extreme charts to perfect in F2, but at the same time, I have never felt so stressed out and exhausted trying to perfect any other chart except maybe 2D Dream Fever because of the constant rollercoaster ride the mechanics take you on. And I also think that not being able to understand this is the reason why so many other attempts to make charts based on this very song have fallen flat on their face by comparison, like fan-made charts that use the arcade mechanics, because all of that diversity and intensity is just not there in the raw mechanical system. And it's not an outlier either, because of so many other charts in F2 that follow similar principles while still being unique and memorable in their own way. Melt, Clockwork Clown, This Is the Happiness and Peace of Mind Committee, No Really, Meteor, 2D Dream Fever, and this isn't something that's exclusive to F2 and can be found in X. Raspberry Monster, Kunoichi, Holy Lance Explosion Boy, these 2 games nailed the mechanical variety, and as a result do what only a few highlights in the rhythm game genre can do. They actually took an interest in how to adapt music into an interactive medium, rather than just being a slew of inputs for the explicit purpose of challenge or score chasing, a design philosophy we like to downplay as the odd gimmick or highlight, but when it incorporated as a standard of how games should be designed throughout, it can make something truly special, something especially apparent in all of the medleys. But before we get to the medleys, part 10, Giving life to Hatsune Miku. I want to give coverage to some other changes/additions to X and how I feel they favor this excited babbling about emotion and texture. As mentioned before, some of these changes I'm not 100% happy about, but they still ended up better than I expected on account of their execution and lending themselves to the game's broader framing. Firstly, the live PVs, and for those of you who don't know, PV is the acronym for promotional video and is the term used in the Vocaloid community for music videos, because we don't like using normal terms that normal people use for some reason. Project Diva PVs can be placed under 3 categories. Story PVs, which involve multiple environments and multiple lines of continuity to show more elaborate visual events. Live PVs, where the character performs on stage on a singular map with a single line of continuity, like a live performance. And the third type, which is the occasional blend between the two, like your melts and your hibanas. Project Diva X was a game that just wasn't doing itself any favors with all of its changes, as the game not only had the weird gameplay adjustments, but it was also met with the decision to have every PV in the game be a live PV with animations copied from previous Magical Mirai concerts, and the characters having minimal interaction with the environment around them, so that being able to swap the stages could be made as an additional element of the customization. PVs like Kagero Days with 360-degree recording environments, dynamic environmental events, and players having some degree of an influence on what happens are unfortunately a thing of the past in X, being purely dedicated to musical routines with dancing and singing, and the stage, while decked out with a series of effects that go off at set points in the music, acting merely as the backdrop. Now, while yes, I even have a bare minimum defense for this decision, I do want to emphasize that how they went about it was Sega dragging out a sledgehammer instead of picking up the scalpel. Being able to swap the stages out is a measly payoff on account of how, to make the stages work with every PV, none of the routines can involve the characters directly interacting with the environment around them, which means, save for the occasional use of props like in Amazing Dolce or Streaming Heart, there is an immense restriction on what can be accomplished. Explicitly only allowing live PVs with a fixed template in X was an unnecessarily restrictive measure that led to an amount of the potential being diminished, and every other element of the game really had to pick up the slack as a result, to the point of where I do think everyone would be nicer to PDX if the performances weren't this restricted. But despite these flaws, while I don't like how forced the live PVs were in the context of the game design, I'm still firm in the belief that these are some of the best live PVs in the series regardless. See, a PV's direction can have an impact on how the player is engaging with the work and what role they believe to be filling, and not only are X's live PVs an immense improvement over the dull and lifeless live PVs of previous works like Spiker and World Is Mine with more vibrant maps and more energetic camera work and choreography, but within the context of X's story and themes, I think having a prominence on the live performance approach was better for this game in particular. I don't want to believe it was a decision made out of laziness. See, story PVs separate the character and the player due to the way they're directed. The character does not acknowledge the player in any way, and the non-linear approach the PVs take when it comes to cinematography and continuity means these characters are framed as being in a separate universe where the player is just a spectator of events that have already happened, and the connection between the two must instead be made through different means, like all that stuff we went over in Kagero Days about having the intensity of the rhythm game chart match the structure of the song and matching the ramping physical and emotional exertion the performer experiences in the PV. It's a similar principle to storytelling in basically all games outside of the rhythm genre, and how if you're writing a story where the main character does not literally break the fourth wall and acknowledge the player like 90% of stories, you still want to apply mechanics and plot events that immerse the player in the role of the character they are controlling, in similar vein to literature and how a narrator might inform the reader about the current state of the protagonist, like if their breathing is heavier or if they feel warmer. Similarly to what games like Pathologic and Undertale try to hit home, the player is an actor on the stage. They're not just a spectator or viewer there to be amused. They are the performer, who is here to engage and should be treated as such. This is not in any way saying story PVs just can't work, period. They're just harder to execute in an effective manner because it's harder to connect the character and the player in their situation. And it's the reason why so many of the new 3D PVs added in Project Diva Megamix just feel so tired and vapid, like they're not making you feel anything, they're just kinda there. And the original 2D PVs that made their way to the game feel even more dull because there's just straight up no connection, period. It's a visual aid with a chart plonked on top of it and nothing more, because these PVs were not designed to be used in a video game. Story PVs are scenarios that are less grounded than a music video of a live performance, and so without proper care and execution, the chart can feel unrelated, and as such less enjoyable. Particular standouts of story PVs that were able to accomplish all this, I'd say Tensei are Time Machine from F and most notably Hello Worker from F Second. Not only because the characters are very clearly expressing their emotions in accordance with the narrative of the songs, but the added camera work of someone's first-person perspective roots us more in the situation, like we are actually taking part, as well as the chance time outcomes being significant actions the character performs, from finishing a scale model of Tokyo Tower to casting away their resume in Rebellion. It feels like your performance in the chart is wrapping up a character arc in ways. Hello Worker in particular is a song that has us being toured around an office by Luca in one clean shot, and as the PV progresses she laments the route her life's gone down more and more while still putting on a happy face in the office and carrying out its duties. Following that, as she runs out the door, we have a calm moment of contemplation and doubt in the elevator with stars and taps as she frowns for the first time in the PV, before the song, and thus the chart, ramp back up the moment she sings her feelings directly to you, the player, running out the building in a moment of liberation. Hello Worker is easily one of the most brilliant PVs in the Project Diva series as a result, because it's not a live performance, and compared to other story PVs, it's not as extra or glamorous, but its raw direction still roots the character and the player together with some form of connection in similar vein to Kagero Days, which I want to point out not only because I think F Second is on a whole new tier of fantastic when comparing games in the series, but I want to hit home that my feelings on Kagero Days were not some gimmick or fluke, and were instead an intended element of the series that can be replicated in many other instances. While a framing device that presents the whole series, X is the game that directly touches on the context of the player helping the Vocaloids sing through their inputs, thus giving it a more grounded backdrop, and it's through going against this direction of separation in story PVs that X has the characters directly acknowledge the player and engage with them. There's frequent eye contact with the camera. In group numbers they're interacting with each other more than ever before, and the streamlined camera work means you're given the wider, smoother scope of what each character is doing in the scene, how they're feeling, and the stage effects that are queued up to the tone of the song. X is hands down the most charming entry in the series, as it's the one that humanizes the Vocaloids the most, and has them engage with the player the most, something that I feel previous entries like PVs were only able to accomplish in works like F Second's remake of Melt and Package, because the camera work and direction is all focused on the vocalist knowing that you're there, especially as PVs that have an increased focus on being able to visually see the character singing their heart out, rather than just having the vocals play in the background, means that the mechanical intensity correlates more to the character's own physical exertion. In a single red leaf, you can see how Luca is orchestrating her notes gracefully. In Lost Ones Weeping, you can see how exhausted Rin looks and how completely aggravated she is. And one could say the Diva Room in previous games breaks that separation and humanizes the Vocaloids, but that breaking isn't present in the core rhythm game to feel like there's a significant connection. The Miku in Cat Food and Spiker does not feel like the Miku in the Diva Room. The Kaito in Ashes to Ashes does not feel like the Kaito in the Diva Room. But the Miku in Love Trial and the Kaito in Eurotanda, they do, especially with one of the most underrated implementations of X, where finishing a live request will follow up with a dialogue prompt from a character commenting on your performance or making small talk. And it really does make you feel like you're Batman. Wait, shit, wrong script. It really does make you feel like you're on this journey through music that makes each performance more exciting and involving, only further emphasized by a small addition that is really dumb in the grand scheme of things, but goddamn, I want to gush about it and I hope to see it return in some form. Another form of live requests is the festivals, where you pick 3 songs in the setlist and they get mashed together into one chart for one big live performance. And again, very small, very dumb, but what makes me always come back to playing festivals is they nail the live performance aesthetic by not just applying a slight hall reverb to the music, but giving each individual song in the setlist its own live soundscape, where the crowd will clap along to the beat and make fan chants to the lyrics. Even if festivals never return to the series, which they probably shouldn't because they're all built around the PVs working with one singular stage, the live soundscapes are definitely something I want to return. Project Diva X is the entry where you are the performer. You are the user who has taken the time out of your day to help make the world a happier place by letting these virtual mascots sing. And at the end of the day, isn't that what music's all about? The thrill of expression to others to make them happier, understanding and further promoting the emotions of musicians that they were able to to bring to a tangible form? The songs we hear in Project Diva, after all, are the feelings of the producers. Unhappy Refrain's inclusion in F just wouldn't be as amazing as it is in that game if we didn't see in Miku the same visible anger and frustration Wawaka experienced in that track's lyrics, and it's a design philosophy that makes every experience in this series stick with you. Rhythm game charts aren't just nebulous pieces of content to consume just to get full combos. They're an interactive package that channels the feelings of many, many different people, from the music producer to the designer of the chart, and how they perceive the intensity of the song on a physical and emotional level. This isn't just me saying the series is good because of the PVs. It's because the whole, and the core mechanical gameplay's contributions to that whole, were made with care for those with a controller, regardless of their musical expertise, to experience those feelings and feel like they are taking part, rather than just letting the substance wash over them like white noise. It's a sentiment that I feel makes the Project Diva series and the entire rhythm game genre so beautiful, and it's rendered even more beautiful by the medleys. Part 11, Oster Project's Wonderland. So the medleys are the best part of the game, and anyone who says they're just bastardized remixes needs their taste buds fixed. After every cloud, the player unlocks a medley performance for that aura that contains a selection of additional songs, old and new to the series, mashed together into one performance with original tuning and instrumentation for the game. Each performance even has this little lead up where the characters need to learn a lesson of some kind with regards to how to best channel that aura, and I'll be frank, there's nothing more endearing than Miku and Kaito going on a spirit journey to figure out what it means to be adorable. To get any potential critiques out of the way, I feel like this is the main instance in the Project Diva series where Miku overrepresentation is a little bit harder to excuse because these are original works made for the game. Even if it's a group performance, the producers have a tendency to mix the vocals so that Miku is the only one that's distinctly audible, and there are times where I feel it even harms the narrative. For instance, how the cute cloud has that journey I mentioned with Miku and Kaito, but Kaito doesn't show up in the cute medley itself, and it's just a solo performance with Miku. Like, you think you could round up an arc by having one of the characters in your storyline show the outcome of their journey or something. Do you really expect me to believe that Michi M was just completely incapable of making Kaito pull off one of his songs? Really? Not even a Luca in ID type thing where you just have him rap in the background. But despite that, these are still the highlights that are bursting with so much energy, and they are so much more than half-hearted compilations like everyone likes to pretend they are. Everyone was critical of the medleys when they first released, mostly because they have songs that can't be played individually in the core setlist, and a wide array of the songs used have never been in the series before, meaning the medleys were their debut. Something I totally consider fair criticism, especially considering the small song count, but come on, guys! Considering what we got in return, I honestly think this is a fair compromise. Not only because these songs turning up in the medleys doesn't necessarily mean they won't turn up in later games, but like, if these songs just got added individually, we probably wouldn't see the medleys at all, because if they existed alongside the singular tracks, we would definitely complain about how the medleys feel repetitive and how they should have definitely used different songs. I'm gonna let you guys in on a little secret. We're gamers, not qualified designers, so we don't actually fucking know what we want half the time. We just make wild guesses about what we think we want based on our previous experiences until we eventually contradict ourselves. And let me tell you, finding that out certainly made writing these essays easier but harder at the same time. I think the biggest draw of the medleys to me is they breathe new structured life to these songs in one unified experience. Hearing all these tracks in a modern setting where new Vocaloid functions are incorporated, or the genres are completely flipped on their heads and you start hearing dubstep in palette, more than justifies their experience in my mind, because it's something refreshing and exciting that channels the brilliance and teases new listeners in terms of what else there is to find in the Vocaloid community. It all comes back to that thing I said a while ago about X being that marvelous Vocaloid gateway where you hear some truly versatile variety that just wasn't present in the original games. Grumpy Waltz was in the first game and is all well and good, but a new version in this medley where Miku's softer pen soothes the listener is my everything. Not to mention, as a self-proclaimed Mako stan, my girl strutting on camera and using her English voice bank for the opening line of Sweet Devil, followed by a burlesque style artcore rendition of the song with the deepest fucking strings and buzzcore samples, is the rawest shit ever, single-handedly destroyed my heterosexuality, and I don't know how anyone can dislike this. Yes, you fucking go, Queen, you are absolutely slaying it right now! I can't use gay slang without sounding like your dad trying to look cool and relevant, can I? The medleys are the cherry on top for what the auras accomplish in showing the versatility of Vocaloid. A grand finale for each aura that displays its own subset of the culture in a huge, bombastic performance that says, hey, We're Vocaloid producers, and this is our voice. Nothing is more euphoric than going through the quirky cloud, a cloud about how being yourself and coming to terms with your differences is what matters, followed by the loudest, gaudiest performance where Len sings about how big his dick is, before Miku chimes in about how learning the Chinese language is the gateway to losing all your friends, but hey, at least you'll see Leslie Chung in heaven. And even if it meant not being able to play all these songs individually just yet, I'm fine with that if it means getting a display like this which is just the most. The medleys are fun and refreshing and joyful, and I think that's what matters. But the best two, hands down, would have to be the beginning and ending medley, the two medleys of the classic cloud which in turn make classic an absorbing structured experience in of itself. Classic, as we've gone over, is the first cloud in the game and plays more into the iconic elements of Miku that are more public knowledge, while the other clouds are seen more as deviations. At this stage in the game, Miku is the only Vocaloid that is able to sing, and you need to generate voltage to restore her ability as well as everyone else's. The order you play the songs in Classic is fixed, unlike the other clouds where you can play whatever you like, and it starts simplistic in terms of instrumentation and vocal dynamics with the first sound and love song, two songs that are basically about Miku introducing herself and her love of those who help her sing, and it gradually builds up in complexity with Satisfaction and Name of the Sin, as you gradually regain Miku's ability to sing as you play, before topping off with beginning medley, Primary Colors. Primary Colors isn't my favourite as a raw song, but it's my favourite in terms of a set piece in the game. Primary Colors starts off as a solo number as Miku sings away after getting her practice in, and the chart is rather simplistic too, but it's after Vocaloid in Love that Dreaming Leaf chimes in. Rin and Len spawn onto the stage to lend a hand, and this dramatic turn of events is accompanied by the increased amount of double notes in Extreme. We then have a small lull in the excitement as Luca glides into Grumpy Waltz, and the chart dies back down while still preserving small ramps of energy in the doubles and sustains to provide more of a contrast that empowers the grand finale. In this finale, Kaito and Meiko jump in, revealing their recovered ability to sing, and with a more complex variety of patterns and note types, they sing and dance to one of Miku's most iconic songs, Miracle Paint by Oster Project, which has been given a modified melody line to make it sound more climactic in conjunction with the previous three tracks. The excitement builds before Miku belts the iconic I Love You, and the player joins in with that sustain with a perfectly timed rush note. Why do I need to explain myself? This is just the best shit. The beginning medley is exciting. It's pure, unprecedented joy that hits so much harder when you journey through the other clouds to unlock the ending medley. The ending medley is a rendition that consists of all the super hard boss tracks from the mainline entries in the series, The Disappearance of Hatsune Miku from the first game, Two-Sided Lovers from Diva Extend, Sadistic Music Factory from F, 2D Dream Fever from F second, before ending with the intense voice of Hatsune Miku from Diva second. Oh, recycling charts for an easy boss fight, are we? Well, it would have been nice to have a few more boss songs in X, again, the song count is piddly, but I don't really think so, and it all stems from leaving Intense Voice, the song from the second game in the series, until the very end of the medley. Not only is the medley in of itself fun, energetic, and exhilarating, but it's just the thematic ties that this medley shows as the very end of the game. We've established over and over that as Hatsune Miku is a piece of software that has no sense of autonomy or artificial intelligence, a head-canonized aspect of Hatsune Miku as a character is that she requires the help of others to sing. The narrative that has been crafted over the years by fans and producers alike is that while existential implications can arise from this trait, Miku and every other vocal synth icon is an extension of the producers and takes up the role as an icon of unity, creation, and self-expression that allows others to live and communicate through her. Seriously, it's no wonder vocal synth culture is so prominent in groups like the LGBT community, because it's a medium of like-minded people from many different backgrounds finally being able to share their ideas and feelings that they've had bottled for years, and so many of my own creative ideas are heavily inspired by the vocal synth community as a result. But back to the medley, the first song, The Disappearance of Hatsune Miku, is about Miku's uninstallation and her contemplation about not being a human being, and that's bookended by Intense Voice at the end of the medley, where Miku accepts that while she may not be a human herself, she is a medium that allows us to express and exchange our humanity, which is in of itself its own way of giving life. Both of these songs are well known for their rapid pace, where Miku sings at an inhuman speed, and it's often seen as comedic or absurd. Hell, all of the songs in this medley have rapid vocals, but personally, I see them as attempts of Miku, and thus the producers wanting to get out all of their countless emotions and trying to get them out as fast as possible, because a 4-minute song, much less a 4-minute medley of 5 songs, is such a limited output that there's only so much you can convey. Two-Sided Lovers is the hectic ramblings of a girl who struggles to differentiate love and lust. Sadistic Music Factory is a campy villain number about the pressures of maintaining a constant output of content, and 2D Dream Fever is about making your own digital revolution no matter your abilities. We've developed a fondness for these characters because of the broader cultural umbrella their presence has forged that has allowed people to create, collaborate, write, sing, play, draw, and so on, and it means that they are icons of the people, not as popular individuals, as celebrities to stan, but as a catalyst for our stories and messages to be exchanged, and they will be with us so long as they are still able to sing and be heard from someone's computer, and they're immortal just like any other piece of art that carries the soul of its creator and contributors. And bringing all this to light in Project Diva X is why I find the Vocaloid community not only so inspirational, because it was the driving force of so much of my artistic identity, but so engaging because it makes me want to ask these questions. I mean, this is basically a sentiment I'm stealing from H. Bomber Guy's Pathologic essay, but if Miku lives on in the work she sings for, and carries the humanity of who she sings on behalf of, am I living on through here? Am I making my emotions eternal from sharing all this with you? I mean, fun fact, I actually made a new TAL voice bank a little while ago, which means that people can even download my own singing voice for their music. Does this mean I'm going to live forever? Or just as long as a bunch of servers stay up? But what if I leave this video and my voice bank on my hard drive and it endures so much from the natural world? Vocaloid, as in the engine in of itself, is on a decline at the moment, mostly because Vocaloid 5 is shit, but is it really going to die so long as we appreciate what its characters stand for? And even if we leave it behind, did it still not change the world for the duration of its existence? And I feel this is a question this finale kicks off only to continue in the game's story. After this medley is finished, Miku discovers that voltage is an energy source that comes from the joy, happiness, and excitement of everyone who listens to her sing. Making voltage from playing Project Diva, from listening to the songs, from dressing in silly costumes, from giving gifts to adorable characters, it's the energy of actively making yourself and other people more happy, and helping them and yourself feel less alone in the world. Project Diva X, while a somewhat weak game that really could have laser focused more on its good ideas, is still a thematic microcosm of what it means to be part of the Vocaloid community and how it has changed us in so many ways. I mean, have any of you ever wondered why Name of the Sin by Ryo specifically is the main theme of Project Diva X? Name of the Sin is a song that tells the story of a young girl who's cursed to be ugly by the goddess of fate, and her wish being to have one friend. And so she meets a blind boy, who the goddess restores the eyesight of so he can witness her curse, yet the boy still remains by her side, thus breaking it. I feel the song can be interpreted in two ways. Hatsune Miku herself is the little girl who was cursed to not sing like a human, and it was not only our passionate artistic output that elevated her, but it was her that lifted our blindness, the restrictions of so many creatives. But an even more compelling read is I believe the girl is a depiction of creatives around the world who don't feel like they belong, who feel like bottling up their feelings and ideas because they think nobody around them wants them. And not only does it just take that one gesture of kindness to allow us to truly be ourselves, but we can lift the blindness from others, we can inspire and give our passion to others for them to create themselves. And while I'm not gonna say it was perfectly executed, I want to believe that's the core theme of Project Diva X regardless, to show the impact the scene has had on the individual and give that experience to the player. Because I thought Vocaloid music was kinda cool playing FNF Second back in 2014, but I didn't realize until playing X years later just how important Vocaloid music is, to the point of wanting to be a fan and get directly involved. And that's just beautiful. And even through all of this, Project Diva X is still a better game than Future Tone.
Now, there are other Project Diva games on the PS4, but we don't bring those to this building.
Yeah, so
Joe, tell us why.
Why don't you guys like Future Tone, the one with like 400 songs?
We only play FF Second and X in this house. No Future Tone allowed.
Why?
Because it turns out that if you make an arcade machine in 2010 and then you don't do any significant mechanical changes to account for your future games in the series that came from later points in the 2000s, it turns out your gameplay mechanics are going to age like piss. Hatsune Miku Project Diva Future Tone is my least favourite localised entry in the Project Diva series alongside Project Mirai Deluxe, because while it's the entry with the most songs and the most complex charts, it's the absence of the additional elements that made the F series and X so brilliant that shows how imperative those aspects are for a rhythm game to incite anything other than ambivalence or apathy. The arcade game happened in 2010 after the release of the first game, and was just a panel with 4 buttons that you tapped in time with the music and some exclusive mechanics. Hold notes, rather than being fixed sustains, are optional bonuses, where you can hold that specific button for as long as possible for more points, and it would sometimes even show up if there's no sustain in the vocals. Occasionally, you would have to press multi-notes, where you press multiple symbols at the same time, and the Future Tone upgrade gave us the touch bar you swipe your hands across to land these little swipe arrows. Even the home console release on PS4 looked great at first glance. I mean, the game's upfront retail price gets you over 200 songs, including ones from the previous games, and it's well known for having the hardest charts in the series, as they're literally the arcade charts ported over. So it should be the best game, right? But even so, I still don't enjoy it that much anymore, and I can't recommend it to a series newcomer because of just how sterile it is. You will get bored playing Project Diva Future Tone, and the game is pretty much obsolete because the mainline series has evolved past it in so many ways, and it just doesn't give you much of a reason to stick with it. Future Tone, more like Past Tone, because its design philosophy is outdated as shit. You know the Switch game that just came out a little while ago, Megamix? The only possible scenario I can recommend you buying that game is if you can't play F2 or X, and the Switch is literally the only platform you have available to you to play Project Diva, because it's just more of the mediocre arcade gameplay. And it's not even bad in the sense of, oh, it was optimized for a controller I don't have, so it's unplayable. Arcade Project Diva is more than playable on a controller, and anyone who says otherwise is lying and needs to get good. But while its history, along with its design, makes it one of the dullest entries in the series, I'm down to take some jabs at this boring little piss slab of a controller. Remember those lovely examples I made about how imperative it is for a rhythm game to have fun, diverse movement around the controller? Kakeru Days' introduction is insanely fun in F2, because it has you constantly darting up and down the controller to flick the sticks and instantly clap in some doubles like the finest cheeks. Playing a rhythm game is kind of like its own dance, as we've said before, and that diverse movement queued up with ramps and falls in the music is just masterful. But fuck that noise, here in Arcade Land you have 4 plastic bongo drums, you're gonna slap them like the Neanderthal you are, and you're gonna like it, Sonny Jim. And over time you're gonna develop a grip that reduces the transfer time between buttons to make the game even less physically demanding and fun. It's even better when you're on a controller, because repeatedly tapping on the D-pad and buttons and not doing much else, oh, my favourite! Remember the painstaking care put into the note types that were added in the mainline series? Doubles for intensity, stars for instrumentation and softness, double stars to maintain the 2? It was such a dynamic form of charting that really carried the impact to the player. Sorry, I forgot we were playing Future Tone where the bongo drums have the mechanical depth of a kiddie pool. I hope you like tapping and basically nothing else. Think back to the stuff I said about ramping intensity in rhythm game charts for a sec. If we made a graph about how that intensity in the music translates to the gameplay, most mainline console charts would look something like this. You know, there's a very nice contrasting ebb and flow that keeps you on your toes. But Future Tone is just a straight fucking line the whole time. But Joe, you literally just said arcade has its own note types. The arcade holds aren't any different from the console holds fundamentally, and the multis and sliders are literally just doubles and stars. Are they though? Because remember, those note types in the console games were used A, in correspondence to flares in the vocals and instrumentation when warranted, and B, were later in the series given their own hit sounds to add flair to the audio design. Multis, swipes, and arcade holds have no rhyme or reason. They have no impact. They have no power or magnitude. It means they literally just exist for the gameplay and to make the game harder, which sounds fine at face value, but a lack of attachment to the rest of the medium and justification for their existence just means they're boring, and it doesn't feel like you're doing anything. Tell me how Sayate's Extreme Chart is justified in any way, and maybe we'll talk. 2D Dream Fever in F2 was just marvelous because of its use of doubles and link stars, but because poor old Future Tone lacked the resources, it was just like, I spammed a bunch of tap notes on the guitar solo. It means the game's really hard? I take it back, best entry, 10 out of 10. There's a reason why I literally only play the arcade game for the songs that are either in Mirai or aren't in the localized console games, because I know that all the F and F2 songs, even if they're harder in Future Tone, are just going to be bastardizations that I feel nothing from playing. This is the Happiness and Peace of Mind Committee, inferior chart. Hello Worker, inferior chart. Clockwork Clown, inferior chart. I bought the Encore packs, but I still haven't touched the extreme charts for Hand in Hand or Lots of Laugh, because I know they're just going to be worse than X's charts by default. By mechanical default. You know Kimi no Taion, that Raw breakup song, and how it has that heart-wrenching guitar solo halfway through? Look at how they slaughtered my boy. Think about how amazing that song would be if it was on F2, and do not get me started on the missed potential that is Futaride. This is what y'all look like when you say you want X's songs in Future Tone. Alright, let's dial things back a little bit. Part 13, the food analogy. There's an analogy I've used like 3 or 4 times at this point because I feel like it makes my opinion a tiny bit more understandable. It was this analogy Igoraptor made when comparing Castlevania 1 and 2, where he described the first game as a high-class dessert you slow down to enjoy the complexities of, because it's much more brutal and systemic and has you actually take advantage of the environment around you, while the second game is a snack food you mindlessly chomp away at because you require specific items or grinding for hearts to progress. I repurposed that analogy by considering X the dessert and Future Tone the snack food, but I think I made a forced food analogy that's even better. In rhythm games, each game is a table containing an all-you-can-eat buffet. These tables, and thus the food they contain, are all varying in quantity and quality that will reach for different ones depending on what looks good up front, and they'll each give a different dining experience. F2 is a nice, sizable table, and there's a good amount of food in there to feed a family of 5, you know, it's got like some good curry and shit, or your favorite comfort recipes. X is a significantly smaller table, and the pork was a little undercooked. Okay, fairly undercooked, but I still look back on it fondly because the desserts were something I've never seen or tasted before, and the main courses had some of the same amazing seasoning you had at the F2 table. F2 was more filling and satisfying, but X was a surge on the taste buds that would never leave you and make you crave more, make you hope the chef improves by the next party, and how the food was prepared in of itself is a fun discussion piece for the night. Future Tone, however? Future Tone is this grand, expansive mahogany surface. The chairs are upholstered with the softest leather and it catches your eye as soon as you walk in, but it's just rice. It's just nothing but rice on the table, and you're eating it with plastic cutlery, and I feel like that's the most understandable way I can summarize why I wasn't able to get into so many other rhythm games. Project Diva Future Tone is just rice. Osu is just rice, Archaea is just rice, Persona Dancing is rice with crappy little scrapings of fat, and rice is fantastic on its own. I love rice in all of my meals, and you've got to try really hard to make bad rice, just like how you need to try really hard to make a bad rhythm game. I even like games like VOCALOID, Musinks, and Just Dance, which are mostly rice, but are at least throwing me some wine and capers for my taste buds, because why would I want to spend my evening sat at a table that's nothing but rice? Seriously, can we coin this term? I'm gonna call it rhythmic rice. I feel like I actually got something out of playing Project Diva X. Despite being the grindy one, I don't feel like I wasted time playing it, because it had something to show, something to say. It showed me new ideas and made me think and feel about what I was playing. Despite playing F and F2 2 years beforehand, I didn't properly consider myself a Vocaloid fan and Vocaloid creator until I played X, because it was just that impactful of a game. F2 and X were games that actually made me smile and cry tears of joy from how effective they were, and as such I have 200+ hours hours playing F2 and 100+ hours playing X. Future Tone is the antithesis, and as such I can barely break 95 hours on it despite in theory having more longevity. It just drops its content and longevity and legacy on the floor with little fanfare and says please clap. It has nothing to say or do, and just presents its content as nothing that's worth appreciating in the long term or expanding into anything better. And I think that's a summary of how I feel about the genre at large, because the rhythm game genre is stagnant and disposable when it really doesn't need to be. See, ideas come and go, and at their introduction, they usually have a rocky period where they need to test themselves with the audience to see what works and what doesn't. In other genres, when an idea doesn't land well, it's usually seen as an opportunity to learn more, to capitalize on the strength so the new idea can come back in a stronger form. I mean, remember how much of a critical and commercial failure Vocaloid 1 was back when it was marketed to professional musicians for making backup vocals? Or for a closer example, think back to that old review of Alien Trilogy on the PS1 that lambasted the game for its twin-stick shooter controls that have now become the design standard for the decades following. Rhythm games, however, are just so niche and so insular that ideas that don't land are not picked apart to find improvement and positive change, but instead used as justification to suggest that change isn't needed in the first place. If something doesn't work the first time in a rhythm game, the peanut gallery will use it not as a glimmer of potential, but instead as a case study to say, see, that didn't work, which therefore means nothing is wrong and the genre's completely fine as is, which then railroads us into games like, well, Megamix, disposable products that don't rock the boat too much, and only exist for focus testing because Sega thinks 3 years counts as a hiatus, and therefore justifies tiptoeing around the market because we were conditioned into thinking a constant, never-ending, exhausting output of vapid content is just what we should expect from all video games, not putting any value in the here and now. But hey, at least it has all the things that everybody already likes. Look at these new 9.5 difficulty charts you can play, that you'll autopilot and disassociate partway through playing, even if you're not that good at the game, because they're not challenging you in the genuine way, where you think, feel, or move differently. The genre for the most part has become boring, and the series has become boring, and I'm still here wanting it to be fun again because it's given me some of my most valuable experiences with games. To provide other allegorical comparisons, if we took rhythm games and platformers, it's like we have an overwhelming deluge of Mario makers, while the Limbos and the Celestes are few and far between. Rhythm games are like the MCU of game genres, where they're all good in that popcorn munching kind of way, but it's only when they're truly exceptional do they reach the bare minimum standard of quality other genres have reached for years. It's the reason why whenever I sound so overwhelmingly positive about a rhythm game, like with Demo, with DCVR, or even with Project Diva X, I like to immediately interject and say, oh, but it's only doing the bare minimum and has a bunch of flaws. Because rhythm game fans are so complacent, and they think they know what they like, and are so averse to new or unpredictable experiences, that if their exact expectations aren't hit in the most predictable fashion possible, that therefore means the game is bad. And if they're being spoon-fed everything they ask for with no desire of the left field, that therefore means the game is good. And I want to reject that notion. As players, we are not an audience that must have every whim catered to. Game design doesn't explicitly exist to appease us with minimal effort on our part. We are the cast members. We are on the stage with the game, and enjoying a game is a two-way system. We need to be able to read and understand the dialogue and themes. We need to understand why something exists in a game. We need to learn its mechanics and systems to find the best way to play it, because if we don't, it's no wonder you found the game so mediocre. Did you actually not like Project Diva X because the experience wasn't for you even when you gave it a chance? Or did you just choose not to like Project Diva X because it wasn't the experience you've had a million times? In conclusion, Project Diva X is the pathologic of rhythm games. Change my mind. Next section! I turned 21 a little while ago, and I've given myself all sorts of choices and branches in life. I'm working to give myself experience, I'm continuing to upload on here when I have time, I stream, I've decided now that I want to be an artist, so I've been studying from home for over a year to hopefully get into college. I basically do what I can to get involved in any new community I end up contributing to, and all this while still learning more about personal facets of myself, like my sexuality, gender expression, my relationships, and my mental health. But becoming an adult, for better and for worse, also means I've become more conscious of time. I want to do things worthwhile, I want to learn and teach new things, find and contribute to communities of wonderful people, and I want to keep myself in touch with my emotions and output them in ways that help me and others understand each other more. Oh, and I like annoying you guys by spouting hot takes for attention, that too. And as such, I've been re-evaluating my relationship with gaming, assessing if I'm genuinely enjoying myself, actively seeking out satisfying experiences, rather than just slumping back into games from my comfort zone that I can just autopilot to pass the time, just so I can stroke my ego while not allowing myself to be alone with my thoughts. I love music too, and I think one of the reasons why is because from being in the closet among other childhood micro-traumas, listening to the emotions of others and the settings from their imaginations made me feel for countless hours like I could be a different person in my head and not accept the dullness of reality. Because I thought for years that I was a dull and blank person, and it filled me with so much anger and sadness. I learned over time that it's okay to be different. That it's okay to dream big, and that it's okay to feel and share those feelings. And it's why I play rhythm games, why I love Vocaloid and vocal synth culture, why I want to channel this passion into my output. Because reality isn't dull. I don't think I'm dull. I just have to try and actively make it all less dull. And that's why I've ended up valuing Project Diva as a series and what I feel makes it work so well as a series. It's not just a silly arcade game where you stare at anime girls while drumming buttons. It's a display of unity and expression. Creatives of all shapes and sizes coming together under one umbrella that makes them feel like their voices are finally being heard, and they're finally allowed to be themselves. And even as a player rather than a creator, it instills so much passion and energy in you that you can't help but feel inspired, or at the very least, happy. It's a series that I love mostly because it makes me happy, and at this point I feel like that's something that's worth holding on tight to. And if it sounds like I'm rambling, honestly, I am. Try Project Diva sometime. It's honestly a really good series, and say hi to the vocal synth community for me, or just any creatives you know. I'm sure they're doing a really good job.